How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Taped Podcast, the most striped podcast in the world. We're your hosts, as always, myself, MickyT.
And me, Nostalgia.
And welcome back to another edition of the Worst to Best series. I know a few weeks ago we said that the Iron Maiden one was going to be the last one, but to be honest, we wanted to do a short one just to kind of cram that in there to officially send off the year proper. Because, to be honest, we actually thought we were going to do more in November, but plans change and it's whatever. So yeah, as I mentioned, we're going to be doing a bit of a shorter discography today, and we're going to do probably one of the most beloved bands of the 2000s. They're pretty much the band that spearheaded the garage rock revival, and of course we're talking about the brainchild behind from Jack and Meg White, the White Stripes. And this is a big one. I only got into the White Stripes recently, so I've had enough time to sit with every one of these albums, and of course, like I said, short one, there's only 6 albums here. We're going to cover everything they did from their self-titled debut all the way up to their final album, Icky Thump, and yeah, I'm sure you all know how this works, so let's get started. So, moving on to our number 6 spot, in my opinion, the White Stripes' worst album is Get Behind Me, Satan.
And I agree.
Yeah, Get Behind Me, Satan is the duo's 5th album, and the one that came after Elephant, which, we will get to. And in my opinion, it's the White Stripes' worst album. I think I'm not alone in saying that either, since, I feel the consensus is that this is one of their weaker, if not the weakest album they've made. But with that being said, I know tons of White Stripes fans at least like a handful of songs from Get Behind Me, Satan. But to be honest, I can't really say that I do like any songs from it. And to be honest, when I first heard this album, I thought it was actually really bad. I'm not as harsh on it now as I once was, but I honestly find it to be just a pretty mediocre album all in all. This does have a few things, positively to note about it. Most notably, its variety and different ideas that Jack and Meg attempted to do on here, instrumentally especially, and I feel like this is probably the most expansive sonically that the band have been on an album. But it's too bad that the songwriting, the production, the ideas are just not executed well, in my opinion. The production just feels like such a huge setback from their previous albums for me. It lacks the punchiness and the rawness that made some of their best albums great, in favor of production that just feels very limp and weak in comparison. There's a fair amount of cuts on this album that are just honestly quite boring and unmemorable, and when they're not that, they're just annoying as hell, and they're annoying because some of the ideas that Jack and Meg attempt to do on here just come off incredibly obnoxious and just straight up bad. Like The Nurse, for example, which honestly is probably my least favourite White Stripes song, to be honest.
Yeah,
and there's moments where Jack's songwriting also just kind of annoys me, and his vocals too are just really bad on here. Like, they try to hit upon some really weird vocal quirks in lines that just sound terrible and just end up adding more to the annoyance that I feel with this album. There's barely a track that I can even say is decent from this thing. I don't even care for Blue Orchid, which is, just, I don't know, it's just such a slog to sit through, and the slog also happens to have some of the worst White Stripes songs ever. And considering it came out after, such a good run in releases, it just makes Get Behind Me, Satan all the more disappointing. So yeah, I think Get Behind Me, Satan is by far the worst White Stripes album. It's not a very likable album, in my opinion, and it simultaneously just contains some of their most unmemorable yet memorably bad material on it. And, I really wanted to like it, but I can't.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't dislike it. Definitely not as much as you do. But I also, it's a very flawed album that came out after what you said, a very good run of albums. And so, yeah, it definitely is a disappointment, and it definitely is a low point in the band's career. Yeah, it's just looking at this project, in the context of their entire discography, it's definitely their weakest effort. While Elephant, the album that came just before this, was just truly cathartic, it felt like the White Stripes had already conquered the world and refined their sound to the maximum. I do respect that they try to kind of think outside the box on Get Behind Me, Satan, and, incorporate some more piano elements, just more folk elements, just do something new. But it just feels like all of these are just different elements are just sort of crammed together and just put in this project without any rhyme or reason. none of the ideas seem really fleshed out. The production is just awful at times. It makes even the good tracks just that much worse. And everything they attempt here, I think, just it seems a little misplaced. I mean, there's tracks that I absolutely love here. I do love Blue Orchid, even if the production on that track is a little awful. I do like Doorbell, but on the flip side, there's tracks like you said The Nurse or Little Ghost, where it just is it was a misstep, to put it lightly. It just doesn't feel like Jack and Meg are in their comfort zone. It doesn't feel like they truly themselves believed in this material. It just seems like a rush, just weirdly, strangely put together mess, and it's definitely the White Stripes' weakest album. And I don't think that's that disagreeable of a statement. Although Louis probably going to murder us.
I mean, he's going to have me murdered for my 5th pick anyway, so it doesn't matter. And my favorite track from Get Behind Me, Satan is Instinct Blues. My least favorite tracks are The Nurse and My Doorbell. My Doorbell is just annoying as fuck to me.
My favorite tracks are Blue Orchid, My Doorbell, and As Ugly As I Seem. My least favorite tracks are The Nurse and Little Ghost.
Okay, we're moving on to our 5th picks. I chose Icky Thump.
I chose The Steel.
Yes, the duo's final album, and to me, Icky Thump, it's a solid send-off to Jack and Meg's legacy as the White Stripes, and, despite its problems, I do enjoy a fair amount of this album. I used to not really care for it, and it sounded a bit mediocre when I initially heard it, but on recent listens, I've kind of grown to appreciate the album more and more, and I think that the duo have some quality stuff on Icky Thump. To get some of my gripes with the album out the way first, I think that the moments where Jack's guitar work gets all noisy and ear-piercing can be kind of annoying on a few tracks. It just kind of sounds like he's trying to a bit too hard to be as abrasive as he can be, and as a result, it just sounds just kind of awkward and at times just very annoying. There's a few tracks on here, particularly towards the back end, that I find boring, and there's a fair amount of songs on here that I think just kind of drag on for too long and fail to really spice things up. Besides that, though, I think this was a really solid album from the White Stripes. The album feels like a return to the band's primary sound in their garage rock blues setting, and it also maintains the melody and the eclectic variety of Get Behind Me, Satan, except I feel like they did it so much better on Icky Thump. Honestly, despite some of the annoying guitar bits, I think that the album has some really solid riffs from Jack. I think that the production is really solid. The songwriting, while maybe not as endearing or as interesting as it was before, is still showing greatness in spades here. And it has some great immediate tracks to its name, as well as, some moody slow burners. The song Icky Thump in particular is probably like my second favorite White Stripes song. It was actually one of the first ones that I properly heard that I knew were by the White Stripes. What's it called? It doesn't count. Seven Nation Army doesn't count, because I actually didn't know that was a White Stripes song when I first heard it. So, yeah, I think despite its shortcomings, Icky Thump is a decent send-off for the White Stripes. It's a shame that, we didn't get more music from the band, and, probably never will get any more White Stripes music, but, it is what it is. Icky Thump, what the fuck? Icky Thump has some really good tracks on it, but it just misses the mark for me in a few instances.
Yeah, I went with the band's sophomore Distill. I still don't really know how to pronounce it. And honestly, this album is good. It's very good. I enjoy pretty much all of it. And it's going to be a recurring theme here. I don't really dislike any of these projects that we're going to be talking about now. It's just, in terms of the albums we have left, it just, to me, feels like the weakest. It's still a good album, and it saw the band flesh out the very raw sound of their debut, and it feels like a step towards albums like White Blood Cells or Elephant, which we'll talk about soon. It kind of cleans up their sound. It goes for a more spacious and grandiose sound overall, and it definitely is effective in what it does. It definitely has some absolutely memorable and fantastic moments, but on the flip side, I also think there's plenty of material here that just doesn't really stand out to me. It doesn't live up to any of the best material on some of the other White Stripes projects. But, that being said, I still think it's a good album. When the White Stripes are the band in question, there's really never a dull moment. Jack's guitar experimentation is still just solid throughout. Meg, her drumming is still just as primal, as punchy as always. And, it's definitely a satisfying album and definitely an enjoyable album, but it just doesn't have that wow factor to me. There's not a lot of tracks on here that stand to me as some of the White Stripes' best. If I'm, making a list of my 20 favorite White Stripes song, I think the only one off this album that would make it on there would be Hello Operator. Other than that, everything's good, but it's just not top tier White Stripes in my opinion.
There's a few tracks on that album that would make it for me.
Maybe.
I mean,
maybe
we'll get
Death
to, we'll
Letter.
get to
Maybe
it.
Death Letter.
There's a few others, but we will get to it eventually. So
Okay.
yeah. My favorite tracks from Icky Thump are the title track, Conquest, Bone Broke, and Little Cream Soda. My least favorite track is Rag and Bone, which is also an awful White Stripes song.
My favorite tracks are You're Pretty Good Looking, Hello Operator, and Death Letter. My least favorite track is A Boy's Best Friend.
Okay, moving on to our number 4 picks. I chose the White Stripes.
I chose Icky Thump.
Alright. Now, the White Stripes debut, which came out in 1999, to me acts as a really solid foundation for the band to work from. And despite its one-dimensional nature, there's some genuinely catchy tracks on here. And I think that the White Stripes came out with a sound that feels definitive to them. To get my criticisms out of the self-titled let me say that again. To get my criticisms of the self-titled album out of the way first, this album is inconsistent and honestly quite front-loaded. For me, the first 5 tracks are just straight up fantastic, but after that, the quality of the tracks just kind of ranges from good to okay. The ideas from the band at this stage come off very limited. Truthfully, I also think it's a little bloated with some filler tracks here and there. And, as a whole, given what Jack and Meg did hereafter, it kind of feels primitive, and knowing what they would be capable of, it just kind of leaves an underwhelming feeling as it goes on for me. But hey, outside of that, the self-titled actually has a lot to like about it. For one, the rough around the edges production really brings forth an energy and charisma that makes some of these tracks. I think that the guitar work from Jack is really good. He comes up with some really sticky and really sick bluesy riffs with a gnarly guitar tone. The band put forth some really cool influences with blends of garage rock to blues rock to hard rock and punk. And as a whole, I just feel like Jack and Meg come through with an interesting sound that needed work, yes, but it was effective to say the least. So yeah, I actually don't have much else to say about the debut. The White Stripes is a flawed yet decent album that, gave the band their own sound, and while they definitely would improve immensely upon what they did here, it has its fair share of really good tracks and ideas.
I went with the band's final album, Icky Thump. One you've already talked about. And while, again, I think this album is good, I think it just comes down to, I think there's better and more memorable releases in their discography. However, after the hot mess that was Get Behind Me Satan, the fact that on Icky Thump, for the most part, the band decided to kind of... I just punched my mic. Sorry. Fucking fuming. The band decided to kind of bring things back to their bluesy, just garage rock roots. They didn't try to really go out of their comfort zone, but at the same time they also expanded on that sound and made something that's, while still very much White Stripes and still very much indicative of everything they've done before, it just is a very off the wall and just bizarre and almost surreal sounding record. Also, it definitely takes a lot more influence from all over the blues sphere, and it just is a very bizarre and just eclectic album from start to finish, and it's one that I think is really satisfying and really memorable throughout. More so than any other White Stripes album, I don't think there's a single dull moment on this project. It's just chaotic, it's just wild, it's frenzied, and it's certainly enjoyable for it. And I think the difference in the experimentation on this project and on Get Behind Me Satan is the fact that while the band does kind of deviate from their normal sound a little and does try and attempt new ideas, I think it still fits snugly under the band's already established dynamic. It fits into their comfort zone, and I think that they're able to, make an album that's a lot more fulfilling and expansive while still keeping to themselves. And, I think that's great. And the highlights on this project are just absolutely magnificent. Icky Thump, as you said, is just a mind-blowing track, and it's probably like a top 3 White Stripes song for me as well. Little Cream Soda is fantastic as well. There's just so many highlights on this album, and it's a really exciting and thrilling addition to their discography, and it's quite the crazy album to finish off a discography that defined the 2000s. But I think it's a very good send-off for the Stripes.
Yeah, my favorite tracks from the White Stripes are Jimmy the Explorer, Stop Breaking Down, The Big Three Killed My Baby, Susie Lee, and Sugar Never Tasted So Good. My least favorite track is Do.
My favorite tracks on Icky Thump are Icky Thump, Little Cream Soda, and Rag and Bone. I fucking love that track, sorry. My least favorite track is Prickly Thorn but Sweetly Worn. Or is it one?
I don't know. I can't stand Rag and Bone. I'm sorry.
I fucking love it.
Alright, moving on to our number 3 picks. I chose Dish Deal.
I chose White Blood Cells.
Ah, interesting. Right. Dish Deal, the band's sophomore album, and it's a lot like the band's debut in some respects, but for me, this is just a major improvement upon what Jack and Meg did on that album, since it feels like the more realized and refined album where they finally found their stride and went on a roll. Plus, the album itself is actually very good and one of the most enjoyable albums that the White Stripes have made, in my opinion. One of my main issues with the White Stripes debut is that it was kind of one-dimensional for what it was, and I kind of felt like we were being fed the same kind of sound over and over, and despite that same kind of sound and ideas crossing over into Dish Deal, I can't help but feel like the tracks on here stick out way more and feel a bit more unique and memorable in comparison. I think that the production is way better and a bit cleaner, but without removing the grit. I think that the predominantly blues-based ideas make for some really strong tracks for the band, and the performances and songwriting is really great. I think that Jack's songwriting chops have only gotten better on this album. The guitar work and tones from Jack once again sound great, and there's some really great tracks on here that truly stand out, and honestly, some of them rank as some of my favorite White Stripes songs. There's a few tracks here and there that, personally don't do too much for me, but those tracks are in the minority, since I think most of the tracks in this album are at the very least good. The standout tracks for me truly sell this album as a really good one, and as a whole, this album is just a good representation and improvement of the band's sounds and ideas. Also, the shorter track list did help to make it a bit more enjoyable than the debut, in my opinion. So yeah, Dish Deal is good. It's a really good album from the band that has some great classics in the White Stripes discography. Despite it not being my favorite from them, I heavily respect it, and I feel like it's a consistent listen. And yeah, I think it's really good.
Yeah, I went with White Blood Cells. First of all, I know a lot of people adore this album. A lot of people say it's the best White Stripes album. I just want to reassure everyone that I think this is a fantastic album. I love this album. And just please don't kill me. It's just, again, the fact that I think the first, my top 2 albums are just that little bit more memorable and just exciting and more fleshed out. But admittedly, my opinion is quite unpopular, and there's very good reason why this album gets such acclaim. It is a massive leap forward from Dish Deal, in my opinion, and it sees the band kind of realizing their potential, and for me, of course, Elephant is the better album. I'll talk about it soon, but just reaching highs that the band had always been destined to reach, and it's in no part thanks to Jack White's incredible guitar work and just off the wall lyricism, Meg White's pounding drumming throughout. It's an incredible album. Everything really comes together very well on here. However, I do think the album is flawed. I'll start with the positives. Creatively, it's a massive step forward from Dish Deal. Tracks like Hotel Yorba, I can't imagine that track being released on Dish Deal. It's just such a wacky yet fulfilling, song. Lyrically, it's just so memorable. It's been stuck in my head probably countless times throughout the last decade. Then, of course, there's I Fell in Love with a Girl, which is a perfect rock song, in my opinion. It's so short, but it just does so much, packs so many punches in its short runtime. It's no wonder why this track gets such massive acclaim. It's absolutely perfect. And just like on Distill, I said this on Distill, when the White Stripes are the band in question, there really isn't a dull moment, and I think this album manages to keep up a pace and energy throughout. It manages to be exciting throughout. But there are some weaker moments. It's not like I think tracks like I Can't Wait or Now Mary are, bad or, even unenjoyable. It's just they don't really stand among the band's best, in my opinion. And as a whole, I do think that the top 2 albums on my list are just a little bit more consistent. I do think the latter half of this album has some tracks which to me just definitely not filler, but don't really, reach the highs of, the aforementioned Fell in Love with a Girl or Hotel Yorba. But still, throughout, very good album. It's got plenty of iconic moments. And it definitely helped launch the White Stripes into the mainstream. And, who knows if we would have gotten albums like Elephant without this project. And it's still an album I love. But there's 2 albums I prefer.
Okay. Right. My favorite tracks from... What was it? Wait, I forgot what my pick was. Distill. Was it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god, I have dementia. Alright, my favorite tracks from Distill are You're Pretty Good Looking for a Girl, Hello Operator, I'm Bound to Pack It Up, Truth Doesn't Make a Noise, and Why Can't You Be Nicer to Me. My least favorite track is Your Southern Can Is Mine.
My favorite tracks on White Blood Cells are Hotel Yorba, Fell in Love with a Girl, and We're Going to Be Friends. My least favorite track is This Protector.
Okay, we're moving on to the final 2 albums on our list, in record time, no doubt. And yeah, for my number 2 pick, I chose White Blood Cells.
My number 2 pick, I chose The White Stripes, their debut.
Ah yes, White Blood Cells. The White Stripes' 3rd album, and it's one of the duo's absolute best albums ever. And for me, that just comes down to the sheer staying power that this album has when it comes to individual songs, the strong songwriting, and the performances. White Blood Cells isn't too dissimilar from the album that preceded it, Distill. It's still residing in that bluesy garage rock revival sound that we all know and love the duo for. But in my opinion, I just feel like Jack and Meg managed to create an even better record with the ideas that they decided to expand upon from Distill. And in my opinion, that better record was a reality, and it came in the form of White Blood Cells. The production is sounding very good on here. Jack's songwriting is fantastic on this album, and that makes a lot of these tracks stick for me. His blues riffs and guitar work are great and memorable on this thing, especially when they're on some of the band's more iconic tracks from the album. And the variety in the track list keeps it sounding fresh, since each track has its own thing going on with its moods and instrumentation. The tracks on here are just incredibly consistent, and Jack and Meg end up writing some of their best tracks on here that have either in an acoustic setting, just general garage rock stuff, and even some of the more melodramatic rock slow burners. Some of my favorite White Stripes songs are on this album. I'll get to them in a bit. I think that this is one of the band's most consistent albums, and as a whole, I just think that White Blood Cells is just a fun album all in all, with some great songwriting, instrumentals, and production. Also that little piano ballad at the end with Jack and Meg both sing is really sweet. Is a sweet way to close the album, so that's always a really nice thing for me. This album has personality. It has the grit. It has the great guitar work, the instrumentation, performances, the great drumming from Meg. It's all around. I just think it's a really great album. Some of my favorite White Stripes songs are on it, and as a whole, it's easily one of their best, but it's not the best in my opinion. That's reserved for one more, which we will get to very soon.
I went with the White Stripes' self-titled debut. An unpopular opinion to say the least, but I will not let the popular opinion sway mine, because I think their debut is a fantastic album. It's, in my opinion, easily the band's most raw and exhilarating project, and I think that just works perfectly with what they're doing here. The band's blues influences have obviously, been an overwhelming presence in all of their albums, in their entire discography, but never once is it as just obvious and blunt as it is on this project. This album just takes the sound of, the early blues and of like the electric blues like John Lee Hooker or Muddy Waters, and drenches it in this punky lo-fi garage rock sound, and it just comes together perfectly. It feels like a modernized love song to the blues. And you know, it definitely helped ushered in a new sound and style, and you know, helped set the foundation for garage rock in the next decade. It's easily the band's most lo-fi, most gritty record, but it just works so well with what they're presenting on here. It's probably the most heavy thing they've ever done as well. There's moments on this thing that are just so raw, emotionally, just so powerful. Especially their cover of Robert Johnson's "Stop Breaking Down." They just make that track their own completely. It's probably one of the best covers I've ever heard. Jack just adds that magic to it with his guitar work, with his his very manic performance. It's just one of the most perfect songs of all time. It's a top 3 White Stripes song for me. It's my second favorite White Stripes song, actually. And you know, a lot of the album lives up to that. It takes a lot of influences, sometimes directly covers, you know, old blues tracks, and, you know, adds a very modern punky feel to it, and it just sounds incredible. It's explosive, it's gritty, it's raw, it's easily one of the band's best in my opinion, and it's an album that I think is just highly underappreciated because it's amazing. I love this album.
Alright, my favourite tracks from White Blood Cells are Dead Leaves in the Dirty Ground, Fell in Love with a Girl, The Union Forever, I Think I Smell a Rat, and I Can't Wait. My least favourite track is Aluminum.
My favourite tracks on their debut are Jimmy the Exploder, Stop Breaking Down, and Astro. My least favourite track, if I had to pick, would be Little People.
Moving on to our number 1 picks, in my opinion, the best White Stripes album is Elephant.
And I agree.
Fuck yeah, dude. Now, this is the absolute shit right here, man. Elephant, in my opinion, is the best The White Stripes album ever. And simply put, this record just blows me away every single time I hear it. Not to mention, it's honestly one of my favourite rock albums of the 2000s, to be honest, because it just packs that much of a punch, and it just strikes me so much as well. You know, to me, Elephant was just everything that the White Stripes were building up to, and, you know, that build-up paid off with their best, most memorable and consistent material ever, in my opinion. Elephant just grabs you by the collar and thrusts you into a garage rock masterclass presented lovingly by Jack and Meg White. It's filled to the brim with the band's best produced, best written, and best performed tracks ever, in my opinion, and for its entire 50-minute runtime, it never leaves me bored or disinterested, since it's just so engaging and enthralling. I mean, at this stage, who doesn't know about the song Seven Nation Army? Overplayed, yes, but it's still a great song that opens up this album nicely, and to this day, it's still great to me. Even outside of the very song the White Stripes come up with of their best... Wait, what was the sentence? Sorry. Even outside of this very song, the White Stripes, came up with some of their best bangers in Black Math, Hypnotize, Now Ball of Biscuit, Girl You Have No Faith in Medicine, and The Hardest Button to Button. Like, come on. There's some really great, endearing cuts in this album that are endearing either because of the strong songwriting or just because of the presentation of the songs. Like on In the Cold Cold Night, You've Got Her in Your Pocket, the best White Stripes acoustic song, by the way. And well, it's true that we love one another, just to name a few. There's a great amount of variety with what the White Stripes were doing on this album, but at the same time, it easily feels like their most immediate and cohesive album. For me, it's also their best produced album, since the production this time around is just so beefy and thick. It lends itself incredibly well to Meg's punchy drumming and Jack's blues-inspired guitar work, which is fantastic all throughout this album. Some of the best written tracks the White Stripes ever came up with are on here as well. Jack's chops as a songwriter really peaked with this album, in my opinion. And as a whole, I just think every song on here is at the very least great. I have no tracks on this album here that feel noticeably weak or bland. They just hit the spot for me. And I think that it's incredibly consistent from front to back. So yeah, I love this album. I think that it's an incredible album that is just such a blast to listen to from front to back. Some of my absolute favourite White Stripes songs are on this album, and the absolute favorite White Stripes song is on this album as well. And I won't blabber on anymore since I've already said enough. Just know that this kicks ass. It's their best album in my opinion, and honestly, if I was going to tell you to get into the White Stripes, I'd say listen to this album because it fucks.
Yeah, as much as I believe the White Stripes debut is underrated as fuck, I'm not crazy. Elephant is certainly a better album, and it's just one of the finest rock albums of all time. This album just has it all when it comes to the White Stripes. Tracks like Black Math or You Have No Faith in Medicine just match the sheer unrelenting energy and raw ferocity of their debut, or tracks like Fell in Love with a Girl. And then there's, songs like Hardest Button to Button or I Just Don't Know What to Do With Myself, which take the foundation that the White Stripes had set on their previous two albums and just take it to complete new heights. There's just standout tracks on every corner. The track Ball and Biscuit is quite possibly one of the best guitar tracks of all time. I just still don't understand how Jack White makes a guitar sound like that. It's absolute magic. And of course, it's hard to talk about this album without mentioning Seven Nation Army, a song that's possibly more popular than any other White Stripes song, every other White Stripes song combined. But it's also just so popular that it's hard to forget how perfect. It's easy to forget how perfect the song actually is. Jack's guitar work throughout is more than just stellar. It defined the 2000s. Meg's stripped back drumming is never as effective as it is on here. Just listen to tracks like Hardest Button to Button and Black Math. Meg's pounding drumming just makes the tracks so just punchy and exciting. It's a moment in their career where everything clicked. It's lightning in a bottle. It's a spectacular album from start to finish, and it's a masterpiece. And I think it's a defining moment in rock in the 2000s and in the 21st century in general. And I think it's going to continue being an important album for decades and decades to come. It's an incredible project.
Abso-fucking-lutely, dude. So based. Right, my favorite tracks from Elephant are, well, all of them, but if I had to pick specifics, I would go with Seven Nation Army, Black Math, In the Cold, Cold Night, You've Got Her in Your Pocket, Ball and Biscuit, which is my favorite White Stripes song. Holy fuck, that song is incredible. The Hardest Button to Button, Hypnotize, which is also a fucking incredible song, and Girl, You Have No Faith in Medicine. My least favorite track is none of them, because this album is a fucking banger from front to back.
Yeah. My favorite tracks are I Just Don't Know What to Do With Myself, Ball and Biscuit, and my favorite Black Stripes song. My favorite White Stripes song, Black Math. No least favorites, let's be honest.
True. And yeah, that's going to conclude today's Worst to Best on the White Stripes. It was a very short one, but a very necessary one, because I really wanted to do this one for a while now. And yeah, thank you guys so much for checking out today's Worst to Best. We really hope that you enjoyed. What are some of your favorite White Stripes albums and songs? What are some of your, your favorites as well, your least favorites? If I didn't say that already, fucking hell. And yeah, of course, necessary links will be in the description to the Cassette Tapes Discord server, our own individual YouTube channels. We will be making the comeback, we swear. Our Album of the Year and Rate Your Music pages. And yeah, of course, my name's MickyT.
I've been Nostalgia.
See you.
Peace and love.